My name is Natalie Monroe. I'm 40 years old, and the moment that defined everything wasn't when I became the first woman to command a Navy SEAL team. It wasn't when I earned my trident or completed Hell Week. It was sitting at my cousin's dining room table in suburban Chicago, listening to my Aunt Patricia destroy my mother's memory for the entertainment of people who should have loved us both. "She'll never amount to anything, just like her mom," Patricia said, her voice pitched low but sharp enough to carry across the mahogany table where 12 family members sat picking at their Thanksgiving turkey. The laughter that followed hit me like a slap across the face. I was sitting in the corner chair literally and figuratively wearing the same navy blazer I'd worn to 3 other family gatherings this year because senior enlisted military pay doesn't exactly cover designer wardrobes. Around me, the dining room glowed with that warm autumn light that makes everything look like a Norman Rockwell painting. But underneath the polished surface, the conversation had the particular cruelty that only families can perfect. "Remember how Sarah used to talk about all her big dreams?" Patricia continued, warming to her favorite topic, tearing down my dead mother in front of her orphaned daughter. Going to be a teacher? Going to change the world? Going to make something of herself? Look how that turned out. More chuckles around the table. My father, sitting 3 seats away, studied his mashed potatoes like they contained the secrets of the universe. Not defending her, not defending me. Just existing in that neutral zone of cowardice he'd perfected since Mom died when I was 16. What they were laughing about was my mother's failure to become the teacher she'd dreamed of being. What they didn't understand, what they'd never bothered to learn, was that she'd given up her education to raise me after Dad lost his job when I was 8. She'd worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, cleaning offices at night, waiting tables during lunch rushes, taking care of elderly Mrs. Peterson down the street for extra cash. She'd died at 42 from a heart attack brought on by exhaustion and stress, and they'd turned her sacrifice into a cautionary tale about dreaming too big. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree," Uncle Richard chimed in, gesturing at me with his wine glass. "Natalie's 40 now? Still in the military, still single, no kids. At least Sarah tried to build something before she gave up. Tried and gave up. That's what they'd decided my mother's life meant. A woman who'd worked herself to death to provide for her family was a quitter in their eyes." "What is it you do again, Natalie?" This from my cousin Jennifer, who worked in marketing for some tech company and treated anyone without a LinkedIn profile like they were professionally invisible. "Something with the Navy?" I could have told them. Could have explained that I was a Master Chief Petty Officer with 18 years of service, that I'd served multiple combat deployments, that I held clearances they'd never heard of. Could have mentioned that the something with the Navy involved leading operations that kept Americans safe while they slept in their suburban beds. Instead, I said, "Communications work. Mostly." It wasn't technically a lie. SEAL teams do communicate. They just do it while inserting into hostile territory at 3 a.m. with enough firepower to level city blocks. "Communications?" Patricia repeated. Like I'd said, I sorted garbage for a living. Well, I suppose someone has to do those jobs. Those jobs. The kind of work that people like them were grateful existed, but would never want their own children doing. "The military's good for some people," Dad finally spoke up, but his tone suggested I was one of those people who needed institutional structure because they couldn't handle real life. "Gives them direction they wouldn't have otherwise." Direction I wouldn't have otherwise. Like joining the Navy after Mom died wasn't a choice I'd made to honor her memory and build the life she'd never gotten to live. Like every medal I'd earned, every mission I'd completed, every barrier I'd broken, wasn't a direct result of the strength she'd given me. "Sarah was the same way," Patricia continued, clearly enjoying the audience she'd found for her favorite performance. "Always thought she was meant for something special." Reality has a way of humbling people like that. People like that. People like my mother, who dreamed of teaching children and ended up teaching her daughter that love meant sacrifice. People like me, who'd apparently inherited some genetic defect that made us think we could rise above our station. I looked around that dining room at faces I'd known my whole life. Successful faces, by their definition. Uncle Richard sold insurance and owned a boat. Cousin Jennifer had a corner cubicle and a 401 Kelvin. Aunt Patricia managed a dental office and took cruises to the Caribbean twice a year. By their standards, they'd made it. By their standards, my mother and I were cautionary tales about reaching too high. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that 6 months earlier, I'd been selected for the most classified assignment in naval special warfare. What they couldn't comprehend was that their communications work niece had spent the last 18 years becoming one of the most highly trained warriors in the American military. What would never occur to them was that the woman they pitied had been personally briefed by admirals, had operated in countries they couldn't find on a map, had made decisions that affected national security while they were arguing about property taxes and school districts. You know what I think Natalie's problem is? Patricia leaned back in her chair, wine making her cruel tongue even sharper. She's afraid to take real risks. The military's safe, they tell you what to do, where to go, how to think. She doesn't have what it takes to make it in the real world. Afraid to take real risks. The woman saying this had never jumped out of an airplane, never rappelled down a cliff face in full combat gear, never made a split-second decision that meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. But I didn't say any of that. I just sat there, taking their casual cruelty like I'd been trained to take enemy fire, absorbed, processed, but never allowed to stop the mission. Look at her, Jennifer added, studying me like I was a specimen under glass, 40 years old, sitting there like she's still waiting for life to happen to her. At least her mother tried to build something, even if it didn't work out, waiting for life to happen to me. If they only knew that life had been happening to me at such an intense pace that most people wouldn't survive a month of it. The conversation moved on to other topics: real estate prices, vacation plans, whose kids were getting into which colleges. I became invisible again, the family's resident failure, who served as a convenient reminder of what happened when you didn't play by their rules. I wasn't afraid of their judgment anymore. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't even angry at their ignorance. I was just ready for them to finally understand who they'd been underestimating all these years. They'd called her a failure. They'd called me weak. Tomorrow, the whole world was going to learn exactly how wrong they'd been about both of us. The whispers started when I was 8 years old. I was sitting on the stairs in our house on Maple Street, listening to Aunt Patricia talk to my father in the kitchen below. Mom was working her second job of the day, cleaning offices downtown, and wouldn't be home until after midnight. Sarah's living in a fantasy world. Patricia's voice drifted up through the floorboards. This teaching degree nonsense while you're out of work? Someone needs to talk sense into her. She thinks she can save the world. Dad's voice was resigned, defeated. Doesn't understand that some people are meant for bigger things and some people just aren't. Some people just aren't. Even at 8, I understood that in their eyes, my mother and I fell into that second category. We were the ones who dreamed too big, reached too high, forgot our place in the family hierarchy. I started planning my escape that night. By the time I graduated high school, the whispers had become open speculation about whether I'd follow in Mom's footsteps, dead at 42 from working herself into the grave for people who never appreciated the sacrifice. She's got her mother's impractical streak, I heard Patricia tell someone at Mom's funeral, always thinking she's meant for something special. The day after we buried her, I walked into the Navy recruiting office in downtown Chicago. The recruiter, Petty Officer Martinez, looked up from his paperwork at this 18-year-old girl with red eyes and a determination that probably scared him a little. "I want to be a Navy SEAL," I said. He laughed. Actually laughed. "Sweetheart, women can't be SEALs. It's not allowed." "Then I want to be as close as I can get until it is allowed." 22 years later, the rules changed, and I was ready. But getting ready nearly killed me. The path to Special Operations for Women in 2003 meant becoming a hospital corpsman and fighting for every opportunity to train with Special Forces units. It meant volunteering for every dangerous assignment, every overseas deployment, every chance to prove I belonged in rooms where they'd never seen a woman before. It meant 18 years of being told I was too small, too weak, too emotional, too everything to belong in their world. The real training started when I was 36 and the Navy finally opened SEAL selection to women. Hell week 5.5 days of continuous training on less than 4 hours of sleep. Running hundreds of miles in boots that shredded your feet. Carrying telephone poles over your head until your shoulders separated. Swimming in 58-degree ocean water until hypothermia became a constant companion. Monroe, the instructor's voice cut through the pre-dawn darkness as we stood chest-deep in the Pacific Ocean, our arms locked together against waves that wanted to knock us down. "What the hell are you trying to prove out here?" I was trying to prove that my mother's dreams weren't too big, that her daughter's ambitions weren't unrealistic fantasies, that the women in my family weren't destined to be cautionary tales about reaching too high. But all I said was, nothing, instructor. Just trying to get through the next evolution. The next evolution, the next challenge, the next test designed to make you quit and go back to whatever safe conventional life you came from. 63% of my Hell Week class dropped out. Men half my age, with bodies built like Greek statues, rang the bell and walked away from the hardest military training in the world. But I stayed. Through the hypothermia. Through the stress fractures in both shins. Through the moment on day 4 when I hallucinated that my dead mother was standing on the beach, shaking her head like I was making the same mistakes she had. "You don't belong here," one of the remaining candidates whispered to me during a rare 5-minute break. "This isn't a game. People die in the teams. You're going to get someone killed." I looked at this kid, 22 years old, built like a linebacker, everything the instructors wanted in a SEAL candidate, and I realized he was more afraid than I was. Afraid that if a woman could do this, then maybe it wasn't as special as he'd thought. "Then I guess I better not fail," I whispered back. The log PT was where most people broke. 6-person teams carrying 400-pound telephone poles over their heads for miles, running in soft sand while the instructors screamed at you to go faster, lift higher, push harder. If one person on your team quit, the whole team failed. I was the weak link on paper. 40 years old, 140 pounds, the only woman in a group of men who outweighed me by 60 pounds each. But when the logs came out, I learned something about myself that surprised everyone, including me. I was unbreakable. Not because I was stronger than them, I wasn't. Not because I was tougher, that was debatable. But because I'd been carrying invisible weight my entire life. Every dismissive comment from Patricia. Every time Dad had chosen silence over defending his wife and daughter. Every whisper that we weren't meant for anything special. When you've been carrying that kind of load since you were 8 years old, a 400-pound log feels manageable. "Monroe!" The instructor got in my face during our 15th mile with the log. "Your team's slowing down because of you. You want to quit and save everyone the embarrassment?" I looked back at the 5 men on my team, all of them breathing hard, all of them questioning whether they could finish. And I realized something that changed everything. They needed me more than I needed them. "Negative, instructor," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my lungs. "We're just getting started." We finished that evolution. We finished all of them. When Hell Week ended, I was one of 13 candidates left out of the original class of 165, the only woman. The oldest survivor by 8 years. But making it through Hell Week was just the beginning. 2 years of advanced training followed. Demolitions, combat medicine, marksmanship, close quarters combat, languages, intelligence gathering. Each phase designed to eliminate more candidates, to separate the SEALs from the almost SEALs. I excelled at the intellectual challenges, the tactical planning, the foreign languages, the complex problem-solving that came with being older and more experienced than my classmates. But the physical demands never stopped being brutal. During combat diving training in the frigid waters off Coronado, I watched grown men with 20 years of military experience break down and quit rather than face another underwater navigation exercise in zero visibility. I thought about my mother during those dives, working 3 jobs to pay for an education she'd never get to finish. Swimming through black water with 80 pounds of gear didn't seem so impossible when you'd watch someone sacrifice their dreams so you could chase yours. The night I earned my trident, the SEAL insignia that represented completion of the most grueling military training in the world, I called Dad from a payphone outside the base. "I did it," I said when he answered. "I'm a Navy SEAL." The silence stretched so long I thought the connection had failed. "Natalie," his voice was small, uncertain. "I don't understand. Women can't be SEALs." "We can now, and I'm the first." Another silence. Then, "What does Patricia think about this?" What does Patricia think? After 18 years of hell, after becoming one of the most elite warriors in the American military, his first concern was what my aunt thought about my achievement. I hung up without answering and walked back toward the base. In the distance, I could see the lights of San Diego, a city full of people sleeping peacefully because people like me were willing to do the things that kept the darkness at bay. My mother had died believing she'd failed. But standing there in my desert camouflage with the trident on my chest, I realized she'd succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. She'd raised a daughter who refused to accept limitations, who turned whispers of inadequacy into weapons of determination, who'd proven that some people are meant for bigger things and that you don't have to ask permission to be one of them. The laughter was still echoing around the dining room when the television in the living room cut to breaking news. This is CNN with a special report. The conversation died instantly. 12 heads turned toward the 65-inch flat screen mounted on the wall, where Anderson Cooper's face filled the frame with that particular expression that meant something big was happening. We're receiving word from the Pentagon of a historic first in United States military history. I felt my blood turn to ice water. Number not here, not now, not in front of them. For the first time in the nearly 60-year history of the Navy SEALs, a woman has been selected to command a SEAL team. Patricia's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Around the table, conversations died mid-sentence. Even the kids stopped scrolling through their phones. Master Chief Petty Officer Natalie Monroe, a decorated 18-year Navy veteran, has been chosen to lead SEAL Team 7, one of the most elite special operations units in the American military. My name, my full name, on national television. With my service photo filling the screen, the official portrait taken 6 months ago when I'd been promoted to Master Chief. The silence in that dining room was so complete I could hear my cousin's 5-year-old breathing in the next room. Monroe, age 40, became the first woman to complete Navy SEAL training in 2019 after the military opened all combat roles to women. Since then, she has served with distinction on multiple classified operations and has been recognized with numerous commendations for valor under fire. Patricia's face had gone white as bone. The wine glass trembled in her hand like she was having some kind of neurological episode. We're going to go live now to our Pentagon correspondent for more details on this groundbreaking appointment. The screen switched to a reporter standing in front of the Pentagon, and suddenly there I was again, but not in a still photo. Video footage of me walking across the tarmac at Naval Air Station North Island in full combat gear, leading a squad of 12 Navy SEALs toward a waiting helicopter. The same woman who'd been sitting in their corner chair 15 minutes ago, being mocked for her failure to amount to anything, was now on national television leading some of the most dangerous men in America into combat. As you can see in this footage from a recent training exercise, the reporter's voice continued. Master Chief Monroe commands the respect of her team through demonstrated leadership under the most challenging conditions. The camera followed me as I conducted a pre-mission briefing, pointing to satellite images, coordinating with air support, making decisions that would affect the lives of everyone in that room. The 12 SEALs under my command, every one of them younger, bigger, and stronger than me, hung on my every word like their lives depended on it. Which they did. Sources tell CNN that Monroe's selection was unanimous among senior Naval Special Warfare Command leadership, citing her exceptional tactical knowledge, proven combat record, and what one admiral called the finest military mind of her generation. Jennifer's mouth was hanging open like a broken door. Uncle Richard was gripping his dinner rolls so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The appointment is particularly significant given Monroe's background, the correspondent continued. She enlisted in the Navy at age 18 following the death of her mother, and worked her way up through the ranks over nearly 2 decades to reach this historic position. Following the death of her mother, the same mother Patricia had been mocking not 5 minutes earlier as a failure who died without accomplishing anything meaningful. We're joined now by Admiral James Kellerton, former commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, to discuss the significance of this appointment. A distinguished man in Navy dress blues appeared on screen, his chest covered with ribbons that told the story of 30 years at the highest levels of military service. Admiral, what does this appointment tell us about Master Chief Monroe's capabilities? Well, Jim, the Admiral's voice carried that authority that comes from commanding respect in rooms where nations' fates are decided. I've known Natalie Monroe for over a decade, and I can tell you without reservation that she is one of the most capable warriors I've ever encountered. Her selection isn't about breaking barriers, it's about putting the absolute best person in position to lead America's elite fighters. The absolute best person. the finest military mind of her generation. Words being used to describe the woman who'd just been dismissed as someone who'd never amount to anything. Can you speak to her combat experience? I can't discuss specific operations due to their classified nature, but I can tell you that Master Chief Monroe has been involved in some of the most critical missions of the past decade. Her tactical innovations have been adopted throughout Special Operations Command, and her leadership under fire has saved countless American lives. While they'd been selling insurance and managing dental offices, I'd been keeping the monsters at bay. Dad finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. Natalie, you're really the first woman to command a Navy SEAL team, I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly through the shocked silence. Yes, Dad, that's what I do for work. The television continued in the background, but I could see that nobody was listening anymore. They were all staring at me like I was someone they'd never seen before, which, in a way, was exactly right. Patricia set her wine glass down with shaking hands. You never. You said you did communications work. SEAL teams communicate, I replied. We just do it while conducting direct action operations in hostile territory. But She struggled for words, her usual sharp tongue suddenly tied in knots. You're just what, Patricia? I asked, and for the first time in my life, I heard something in my voice that made her flinch. Just like my mom? The room went dead silent, except for Anderson Cooper's voice explaining the rigorous selection process for SEAL team commanders. Because you're right about one thing, I continued, standing up from my corner chair. I am exactly like her. She taught me that the only limits that matter are the ones you accept for yourself. She showed me that real strength isn't about what other people think of you, it's about what you're willing to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. I walked toward the living room, where my service photo was still displayed on the screen, but I paused at the doorway. The difference is, she never got the chance to prove what she was capable of. She spent her whole life taking care of people who never appreciated the sacrifice, but she raised a daughter who wasn't going to make the same mistake. I looked back at the table full of people who'd known me for 40 years but had never bothered to really see me. I don't do communications work, Patricia. I command the people who keep you safe while you sleep in your suburban beds, and I'm damn good at it. As I walked out of that dining room, leaving behind 40 years of their assumptions and limitations, I heard the television in the background. Master Chief Monroe's appointment represents not just a historic first, but a new chapter in American military excellence. When asked about her selection, she reportedly said, I'm not here to prove anything to anyone except the enemy, and they'll find out soon enough what that means. The woman they'd dismissed as a failure was about to lead the most elite warriors in the American military into combat. The niece they'd pitied was making history while they were still trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Some people are meant for bigger things. Mom always knew that about both of us. Now, finally, so did everyone else. The silence lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. 12 pairs of eyes fixed on me, the woman who had just shattered 40 years of their assumptions. Patricia broke first. Her wine glass slipped, shattering into crimson shards across the hardwood floor. She didn't even notice. Her gaze was locked on me as if I were a ghost in her perfect suburban world. Natalie, she whispered. I had no idea. 1. No, I replied, calm and steady, the kind of calm born from years of life and death decisions. You never asked. You never wanted to know. Dad's voice followed, strained and unfamiliar. 18 years. You've been doing this for 18 years and you thought what was convenient. I cut in. It was easier than caring enough to find out who I really was. On the television behind us, the footage shifted my promotion to Master Chief, the ceremony Dad had missed for a golf tournament. Anderson Cooper's voice narrated. Her commanding officers describe her as a tactical genius whose innovations have been adopted throughout Special Operations Command. A tactical genius. The woman they said would never amount to anything. Jennifer's voice cracked through the silence. But you always seemed so ordinary, I asked. So unremarkable? So much like my mother? She flinched. Every insult, every dismissal, they all came back to her in that moment. Patricia's voice shook. Your mother, Sarah. We never understood. You understood perfectly, I fired back. Her dreams were too big. Her sacrifices made you uncomfortable because they reminded you of your own limits. I stepped closer, my voice carrying the fire that had pushed me through Hell Week, combat deployments, and rooms filled with doubters. But she didn't fail. She succeeded. She raised a daughter who refused to accept limits others tried to impose. The television shifted again, grainy combat footage. Me leading a raid, coordinating with helicopters, making decisions that kept my team alive. Master Chief Monroe has been involved in the most critical counterterrorism operations of the past decade, Admiral Morrison's voice declared. Her leadership has prevented attacks on American soil and rescued dozens of hostages. Mea. While they debated property taxes, I was saving lives. You know the hardest part? I asked the room. It wasn't the training, it wasn't combat. It was sitting in gatherings like this, listening to you mock my mother's dreams while I carried the burden of protecting the freedom that let you sit here and judge us. Dad's eyes filled with tears. Natalie, I'm sorry. About your mother. About you. I was wrong. No. I studied him, the man who'd let his sister destroy my mother's memory, who had never defended us. I know you are, but some wounds run too deep for apologies. I turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. You want to know what Mom would think? She'd be proud. Not because I became a SEAL or made history. She'd be proud because I learned her greatest lesson. Your worth isn't measured by others, it's proven by your service, your sacrifice, your courage to fight for what's right, even when no one believes in you. I met Patricia's stunned eyes. She didn't fail. She succeeded beyond what you'll ever understand. As I walked away, the television blared. Master Chief Monroe will officially take command of SEAL Team 7, a new chapter in American military excellence. We did it, Mom, I whispered. We showed them what we're made of. If Natalie's journey moved you, don't let it end here. Share your thoughts in the comments, inspire someone today, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that remind us what true courage looks like.